Hello and welcome to SindyXR's Wellness Journey interview series. I'm Diana Canaan, board member and CFO of SindyXR. And today we have the honor of interviewing Alik Christianian of REWRITE. And REWRITE is an innovative solution for fertility that uses your biology, genetic testing, and nutrition. So I'd like to start off by telling you that when I was researching your company, it felt like a breath of fresh air because my fertility journey, hopefully it has not ended, but it took 10 years for my husband and I to have my daughter. So we have been through every experience you can imagine with doing regular allopathic care, nutritionists, and there's just a world of confusion. So when I saw REWRITE and the solution that you have for people like myself, it made me emotional because I felt as though this is exactly what women like myself need, right? And we always think that nutrition is so important, but traditional care doesn't factor that in, or even other types of alternative medicine. So I'd like to ask you how you came about to found your company.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. It's kind of a long-winded and very kind of non-traditional, non-linear, kind of fragmented story, but all out of the conviction, kind of similar to your story of like frustration and kind of this black box of navigating a lot of different avenues of, medical pathways, understanding that there's the allopathic care, there's the naturopathic care, there's the world in between with nutritionists and kind of a mix of all of these different medians, but nothing where it's all communicating with one another and kind of coming to a common solution of meeting the science where the medicine is and vice versa. But it started, I think I would say, when I was 16 years old, with kind of a personal story. My aunt was diagnosed with unexplained infertility. At the time, it was, this was more than 10 years ago. But really, people had no concept of what that even meant. They couldn't find a solution for what the fertility problem was. Flash forward, we really still have a lot to do in that regard, but I'll get to that. But back then, obviously it was even more antiquated in terms of the guidance that was given to both the female and the male counterpart. Male counterpart wasn't even considered in the equation, but my aunt ended up going through multiple rounds of IVF and was never able to get pregnant, unfortunately. And after the treatments of IVF, she actually was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
I'm so
sorry. It came back, thank you. It came back as a rare form of sarcoma and intestinal cancer. I think actually it might have been uterine sarcoma ultimately.
Oh, no.
And so a lot of like the imbalances that really weren't addressed, whether it was metabolic dysfunction, thyroid irregularities, certain, patterns of kind of metabolic irregularities really weren't addressed. And ultimately, I think that's what led to kind of the IVF treatments kind of compounding to that. But I thought I wanted to pursue medical schooling, was completely dissuaded from that whole experience being in the hospital with her. And so I ended up pursuing international relations and kind of more human rights advocacy through the lens of kind of humanitarian aid, working at the UN. So I ended up working at the UN for a little bit in undergrad and graduated. And when I graduated at the height of the pandemic, I thought I still wanted to work in that world, but the jobs were very few and far between. So I ended up actually working at an OBGYN clinic back in Colorado. It was one of the only jobs I could find, but kind of by happenstance, I was brought back to like my aunt's experience in the fertility clinics and working through that process. And I was reminded just how still antiquated the guidance was when it came to nutrition, lifestyle support, navigating and supporting these couples throughout the pregnancy journey. And I was frustrated because I knew from my own health experience, I kind of had some of my own issues in undergrad, went to functional medicine as kind of a alternative to the allopathic treatments that I was kind of receiving. Doctors were telling me I needed to go on thyroid medication. I didn't want to go on medication. And so I kind of found functional medicine and was able to slowly understand the role that genetics plays in my own health in terms of metabolizing key nutrients, and was able to reverse kind of this Hashimoto's thyroid condition that was ultimately
Wow. So you actually reversed it. That's amazing.
And it was actually, my mom was diagnosed with Hashimoto's before me. And it kind of was, becoming a pattern in my family. I didn't want to go on medication. And so I was very vehemently opposed. I wanted to find an alternative, and I did successfully. But I think that kind of slowly started to peel the onion for me in terms of like, wow, there's a whole world of nutrition science that's out there that we are just scratching the surface on in terms of the medical world and how much we knew in the medical world, that the science just wasn't communicating to the medical field and vice versa. So I think that was the start of like my real frustration of, wow, even like 10 years later, I'm not seeing a change. I worked in the legal field and continued to work in that after I worked at the OBGYN clinic. And I worked for a law firm specializing in biotech and health tech companies. And so I saw there that even companies at the earliest stages weren't really honing in on this one aspect of precision nutrition, and specifically through the lens of fertility and pregnancy. And so kind of I saw a perfect opportunity to really bring experts in the room, bring doctors in the room, and start to build the company that I envisioned, which was REWRITE. So that's ultimately how the company was born, but on the mission that we can do so much more when it comes to precision fertility care and helping couples, individuals understand their biology to really empower them to make the right choices for their fertility, regardless of what path they choose. So if it is IVF, if it is IUI, they need to know that they have certain genetic predispositions that can lead to estrogen metabolism being, at a slight impairment. And so they need to factor that in when they're doing precision protocols when it comes to the hormone treatments, et cetera. So all of those pieces kind of just to further embolden and empower the couples to make the right choices for their unique fertility story.
And is that the reason that you chose the name REWRITE? Is it to rewrite your journey, your fertility journey, the struggle, to something that you can understand?
Exactly. It's that, and it's tied also to genetics. So we think at REWRITE, and we believe this from the science, that you can literally rewrite your genetic expression. So your genes, although they might be set in stone, you're born with everyone has the same genes, right? But everyone has different genetic variants within those genes. But you can express those genes differently depending on your lifestyle and your diet, your environmental exposures. And so the way that those genes express, that's where we're allowing you to rewrite your health story by really empowering you to understand that your lifestyle and diet have such a profound impact on the way that your biology is ultimately functioning.
So with your specific example with Hashimoto's, you were able to rewrite maybe the genetic code that was turning on some of the symptoms.
Exactly.
Is it through nutrition?
100%. And you're hitting it on the head. Hormones are a symptom of the underlying metabolic dysfunction, right? So certain nutritional deficiencies or certain impairments in the way that my body was metabolizing certain nutrients were causing increased levels of inflammation in my blood, which were then causing a cascade hormone effect, which was causing that imbalance in my, TSH and T3, T4, all of those levels being, slightly elevated or under elevated, depending on, how they were analyzing it. But that is really a symptom to the underlying metabolic dysfunction.
And so how is that connected with when you have a male and a female and they perhaps might both have fertility issues, or traditional medical care is saying that just the female, maybe she has an ovarian reserve problem and maybe the sperm's coming back normal. So how are you joining those two together? Because what if the male also has maybe problems with mobility or motility, and now you have two factors that are working against each other?
Exactly. It's a great question. So at REWRITE, our doctors kind of look at it from a cellular health perspective. So obviously sperm made of cells, egg made of cells, right? Ultimately, that's the core foundation. And so we look at it from like a systems biology understanding that you can optimize the cellular health of the sperm, optimize the cellular health of the egg. Although ovarian count is something that is maybe a non-modifiable factor, the quality of the eggs, the quality of the sperm can be improved by your overall cellular health. And so the earlier and more proactive you are about optimizing that system's biology, the better those outcomes can be, which ultimately leads to like a more optimal fertility kind of terrain is how we look at it.
And so how do you help, how will REWRITE help people who are overwhelmed by the amount of information? Because it does seem as though you when you're doing genetic testing, you can get so much information and then so many nutritional maybe protocols and supplements, it could become overwhelming. you're hearing something from maybe one physician versus your nutritionist, and it gets very confusing fast, and you
100%.
tend to just want to give up. So how will you help? How does Rewrite help find a solution to that problem?
Yeah, it's exactly why I think what we're building, the tech platform that we're building, is solving for that big pain point. I think the confusion surrounding what supplements to take, the confusion surrounding what genetics I should be looking at, all of those pieces, all that data, it's really empowering, but it's also overwhelming and confusing. And so the way that we've distilled it on our platform is we have 3 kind of buckets. We have a questionnaire of sorts that takes into account your current habits, your current lifestyle patterns with you and your partner, and kind of understanding from a toxicology perspective also like what your environmental exposures are and could be. Then we look at it from the genetics layer. So we've built our panel based off of genetic variants that are directly implicating fertility, whether it's sperm health, ovarian health, metabolic systems biology health. And we've kind of narrowed that analysis down. And then we look at the blood biomarkers to understand in real time what the nutrient levels are like within your body, and kind of looking at it from a more allopathic, but within the functional medicine kind of lens of kind of all of these pieces all together. And the platform itself is generating based on our algorithm. And so this is like an AI leveraged platform, but clinician created and guided, that basically creates a really succinct and clear protocol of what supplements you should be taking based on nutritional changes that we're recommending first. So it's a very nutrient focused, food first approach. And then if you can't meet those requirements in your diet, we recommend specific vetted supplements that are to our standards that will fulfill those gaps based on your genetic variants and all of these other pieces of the equation. And then looking beyond that to lifestyle support, we look at specific recommendations, whether it's endurance training, strength training, whatever it may be, based on your biology, based on what you're genetically primed for, and kind of factor that into also your environmental piece. So it's kind of looking at a full gamut of the full life cycle of like from nutrition to environmental exposures to your exercise regimen, all these pieces, but laid out in a really succinct and clear way so you can feel like it's an actionable plan instead of something that's just a data dump. And I feel like a lot of the direct-to-consumer companies either just provide a lot of data or don't provide that next action step. And that's what we're also trying to solve for.
I think this would be a great first start for someone who maybe has been trying for 3 months and doesn't want to jump into an IVF or a solution that's going to require a large financial cost, right? And then also time to be able to go in for testing, and then the drugs and the side effects that could happen, like with what may
Exactly.
have happened with your aunt. They do have side effects, and maybe they're rare, but even for that one person that it affected, it affects your life forever. And so it's great to hear that you're doing something and causing change about what happened to her. So she must have been really close to you, and to see her live through that is heartbreaking, because all she wanted was to create a new life and have a child. So
Yeah.
I also was my first option after I had recurrent miscarriages. So after my second miscarriage, I was told and pressured by everyone that only solution at the time, this was about 12 years ago. And there was a solution at the time of just go to the IVF clinic, right? And so we went to this big IVF clinic, and they tested my ovarian reserve. It was low. And they just said, okay, we just recommending going straight to IVF. I
Mhm.
didn't know what that was. And, it was a popular term. Okay, let's go. And I just ended up having massive headaches, mood swings. It didn't work. Right. And so then I went in for subsequent ones. And then all of a sudden, the ovarian reserve just went to zero. Literally, it was negative. It was less than 0.0001 was my ovarian reserve. And the doctors had said, I don't know why this happens, but typically after a cycle or two of IVF, we see this, that the ovarian reserve just tanks. So
Wow.
he literally said that, one of the best doctors in the Boston area for fertility said that. And so how do you not know? Obviously, the drugs did something to the reserve to push it to this, final resting place. But I did some research and I found another doctor, and she said, as long as you're cycling, there's still a possibility of having a child. And
Correct.
so ultimately it didn't work. IVF didn't work. But after that, after seeing her, I ended up conceiving naturally. So I tried other things along the way. I did Eastern medicine, which was a full-time job to prepare the herbs, hours per
Yeah.
day, prepare them. I had another miscarriage when I tried that path. I met with a nutritionist, and actually, while I was meeting with her, I became pregnant. So it was about a 6-month process. So there was something there, and she discouraged me from continuing to do any more allopathic treatments because she had already seen what I had gone through. It wasn't working. And ultimately, I'm not sure whether it was giving up at the end and saying, okay, I'm done with everything. So that stress just comes off of you. And then still implementing the nutrition plan she had in place, I was able to conceive. And I have my daughter today when
That's
I was
amazing.
diagnosed with less than 0.001 AMH. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a success story. And we don't know what, maybe nutrition had something to play with that, right? And so if we had known and started with that earlier, then maybe I would have had that child and have saved myself a half a decade of heartbreak and essentially a down payment on a home. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, Diana, that story is such a testament to the value of like what we're building at Rewrite. And ultimately, I think it speaks to also like the unknowns and knowns within the allopathic and Eastern medicine, kind of that intersection of the two. Because I feel like even within, and obviously I'm not the doctor on my team, but we've had conversations about what AMH really indicates. And there's a lot of controversy still, whether it's count, whether it's quality of the ovarian, reserve. There's a lot of like misnomers, misunderstandings. There's really still like a lot to be determined, but ultimately we do know that cellular health is the core, right? So if we can improve cellular health through nutrition, through these environmental exposures, I think that's exactly to your story. Like there are things that are modifiable, even if we think that they may not be. I love hearing your story, and it makes me so happy that you have your daughter now. And that you were able to find, someone to kind of guide you on a more holistic path as well.
Yeah. And then even now, I would love for her to have a sibling, to have a second
Yeah.
child. But, I can't go back to what I was doing before. I'm happy where I am now, and I would love to have more children. But, so something like Rewrite, I would love to try it to see, even if it doesn't, for maybe I've already gone past the age limit, but to know, what was it this entire time genetically that I could have changed that maybe did work when I was using the nutritionist. Maybe there was some nutrient that she was giving me that actually supported my egg health, and I
Yep.
was able to carry it to term instead of
Yeah.
having these recurrent miscarriages. So
I love that. And I
yeah,
also, to add to that, I think the value of Rewrite too is that it can be not only for fertility, but your long-term health. I think we see fertility as like one of the first biomarkers in your health. And so this analysis that we're building can kind of compound as your own kind of compass in general for your long-term health, because your genes don't change, right? So all of these insights are going to help you, whether it's transitioning from perimenopause to menopause, the hormone treatments that you might consider at that time. It's all kind of related ultimately to how you want to, optimize through all of these life transformative kind of stages to better prepare and better prime the body for those big moments, I think.
excellent. So you'll have a customer with me for sure. I would love to love to try Rewrite
We'd love
for
to
my
have
own
you.
health, and even if it's not fertility, just hormone and menopause symptoms. So that would be wonderful. And also supporting the SindyXR community. Anyone who is going through a very difficult time with their fertility journey, that there is a community here at SindyXR, and we're able to help you find those bridge those gaps and find community in not feeling so isolated and alone while you're going through this transitionary period. Because everything in life is a season, right? This is just a season in your life and it'll pass. But if you can have a community that's there to help you walk through that, that will, I think, help also too with the mental health and overall health when you're going through infertility. So where do you see the future of fertility, and what are some things that you'd like to change in the short term so that couples can have more confidence in taking control of their own health versus, and how does it fit in with the allopathic care as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think ultimately, I think I see fertility as kind of that first biomarker. Like I was saying, it's really like the starting point to people really claiming like the control over their lifestyle, their diet. And I think for something bigger than themselves, like it is about them, but it's ultimately for the health of their child, right? The epigenetics portion of this, like you're imprinting your genetics onto that embryo. So the more optimal that expression is of your genetics, it really can like change generations of health. And that really is, I think, something that we at Rewrite are so excited about, and the implications of kind of the interventions that we can have on generational health truly is like something we value and kind of hold dear to us and our mission. But I think the future of fertility really is like all of these different medicinal practices and groups communicating with one another and seeing what works and what doesn't, whether it's acupuncture and those treatments, you know, during the actual fertility treatment process, and understanding how that's actually affecting, you know, embryo implantation and all of these other aspects, whether we're further understanding certain other biomarkers that are affecting, you know, implantation or the uterine environment, and how we can really track new biomarkers or new kind of insights from the body, what the body's telling us. I think there are so many ways that researchers can communicate with OBGYNs, can communicate with fertility specialists, and really start to bridge this gap that has become a massive divide between, and I think you mentioned like the OBGYN handoff to fertility clinics. It's an immediate pass off. They don't really, and I think by nature of the OBGYN infrastructure being so, in lack of supply, high demand, they are turning over patients, you know, in 15 minutes. They don't have the bandwidth to even provide a level of care that is up to their standards. I think it's such a disservice to the medical community and to those doctors. I think if we can start to address that there's a real problem with reimbursement codes and how we code for women's health treatments, and the preventative care aspect, because preventative screening for genetics should be standard of care. This should be, a preventative measure that is totally reimbursable, 100% recognized as a necessary step for fertility and the health of your future, you know, pregnancy and health of the child. But again, until the kind of mentality shifts around genetics testing, and until we have more of a preventative care aspect and preventative care mindset rather than the reactive care model, where everyone is hyper specialized in their specific niche, that ecosystem will never really, you know, move forward and communicate. So that's my hope. And I think that's kind of what at Rewrite we're hoping to kind of bridge the gap and communicate between all these different specialties and have them be able to understand one another.
I love your answer, how you've made the connections between the different modalities in healthcare, the lack of support. And, you know, we have so much to look forward to as technology progresses. You mentioned AI that could only help us in this situation with just doctors being overwhelmed. There's just not enough time, right? And so maybe some of these tools could help support patients and people who are going through not only fertility, but other hormonal issues as well. So thank you so much, Alik, for your time and for sharing your story and telling us about Rewrite. And we'd love to hear from you again, maybe in a future interview series, wellness interview series. And we hope that everyone enjoyed our conversation. And you can reach out to myself, Diana Canaan at SindyXR, or Alik Christianian at Rewrite.
Perfect.
you.
Alik, rewrite. Thank you so much. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.